Welcome everybody. Welcome to our second webinar, the Furloughed Leader series. I know that quite a lot of you attended session one, so welcome back. For those of you who are new to the Furloughed Leader series, welcome to today's session. My name is Tia Colajanni. I'm the founder and chair of WHTL, an organization devoted to increasing diversity and inclusion across hospitality, travel, and leisure. I'm here with Richard Nugent, managing director of 21 Leadership. Richard has been absolutely fantastic because he has been supporting us with these series of webinars. We've got 3 in the first series, and we've just launched, actually between yesterday and today, really everything has gone up on the website, another 3 sessions, another series to take you all the way to the end of June and supporting you on this journey as you prepare to go back to work, or as you prepare to welcome your employees back to work, sometimes in June, sometimes in July, depending on when the government issues its instructions to that allow us to go back fully functioning at work. Couple of things, some of you asked for some prep, so I sent it out yesterday, a video from Richard with some guidelines, so hopefully nothing too heavy for a bank holiday weekend. If you've not had a chance to look at my email and click on the links, don't worry, you're not going to miss anything out. But if you have a chance later on, have a look. And if you're joining us for the next session, have a look. We might make a couple of tweaks to that, so you always have something to think about before you join the session. So as a couple of more people have joined, I will just say, please use the chat function to communicate with us, and click panelists and attendees, so everybody benefits from your reflections and questions and considerations. And Richard, I'll hand over to you to take us through today's session. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tia. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm delighted to be back with you again. I hope those of you who managed to get outside over the weekend had weather like we did up here in the Northeast. And it makes us even more grateful that you've joined for this session. So the theme of this session, this second session in the Furloughed Leader series, is really transparency and trust, and their importance in leadership, but also then how you can demonstrate those and generate those, because they're always important, but I believe they're even more important in changing times, and I just think even more important in these unprecedented times. So those of you who were here with us last week, you will probably remember the theme of the design, if you like. So the first session really focused on you as a leader, how you're able to self-lead and influence yourself to be resourced up enough to then to be able to lead others. And I always think that stage is one of the most neglected in leadership in any times. You have to be resourced up enough as an individual to then to be able to give to others what they need and to be able to lead them. And then by leading yourself, then you can lead others, and together then that means you can lead the business and get the results you need and deliver what you need to deliver. So that's the pattern of the design of the first 3 sessions of the series. And you also might remember that we spent some time on the 3 fundamental needs that we need to boost while we're going through unknown change, which was a sense of certainty, a sense of direction, and a sense of empowerment. So those of you who were with us last week who remember that, I'm not going to point to those explicitly during the course of this session, but it would probably be worth just making a note of them again, because you might be able to cross-reference a lot of what we are going to focus on in this session with those 3 things. So last week we talked about how do you create a sense of certainty, direction, empowerment for yourself. This week is really how do you create a sense of certainty, direction, empowerment for other people through the things that we're going to do. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to focus on the #1 thing that followers most want from leaders. And you'll see why I've decided to focus on that, given the themes that we're focusing on as we get to it. I think it's the thing that probably for me, if we if we crack it as a leader, if we do the number one thing that followers want from leaders consistently, then we can be pretty sure that people will follow us with an energy and an intensity and a commitment that won't be there if we don't do it. So that's really important. We're also going to spend some time looking at actually numbers 2, 3, and 4 on the top 4 list of things that people want from leaders as well. Again, it'll make sense as to why I'm chunking those in those way, but these 4 things form the basis of leadership that we do in the best of times, but also the work that we've been doing over the last 8 to 10 weeks. These things, again, have just become even more important. I'm also going to share with you a couple of really simple to apply, really straightforward tools. One, to help you demonstrate and engender transparency. And another, which answers the question, what do we say to people when we've got nothing to say? And everybody who is on this call knows that during change, we need to communicate much more than we do even in other times. But the challenge for that is often we haven't got anything to say. So I'm going to answer the question, what do we say to people at the moment when we know we should be saying something, but we haven't really got anything to say? I've also looked to design this session in such a way that it's applicable and it's transferable no matter what your position is. So for those of you who are working, and you have probably some people who are also working, maybe some people who are furloughed, you'll be able to apply lots of the things from this session straight away. For those of you who are furloughed yourself, then it will give you something to reflect on and to plan with. So when you go back to work and you, if you like, formally leading other people again, you'll have a basis from which to start from. And the other group of people, if I'm honest, I've kept in mind through this is I think, unfortunately, there's a reality that some people in our industry, when they go back to work, it may be in a different role or with a different organization. So hopefully my aim is that some of the research I'm going to share, as well as the practical tools, will help you as you're preparing for your next role and preparing to get your next role. So all of you are in mind with I've had all of you in mind with those things. One other thing before we get into the main meat of the session, I want to repeat a little bit of what I said at the beginning of the last one, which is I want this to be a learning experience. So there is so much online stuff at the moment which just is working on the basis that just because I transfer some information to you, that means that you've learned, and we know that that's just not the case. So I do want you to ask any questions that you have. I'm going to ask a few questions during the session. If you can answer them in your chat, it would be brilliant. If you have an insight or an idea or an action you're committed to taking, please share it in the chat as well, because other people will pick up on that and will steal your idea, and that really creates, it's much more a generative learning experience. Because I know that learning is not about the transfer of information. Learning is about the creation of value, meaning, belief, and action. So whatever I can do during or after this session to help this stuff seem important to you in your context, whatever that is, for it to make sense to you, for you to believe that it's got some value to doing it, and also to help you to take action. Anything I can do to do that, like I say, ask during the session or get in touch afterwards. I'll do anything that I can. So all of that said, I want to get into the first part of this. So I'm calling this the number one thing. I've studied, read up on, taught, focused on leadership now for almost 20 years. We read constantly. As I came into the office this morning, because I'm not in here very often at the moment, I realized how many books there are around. We've normally got a couple of books going on at any particular time. We've studied what we think the best is out there. We put 20% of our profit back into our own development all of the time. And through all of that, there's one piece of leadership work, one piece of leadership research that for me stands tall as the most useful piece that I've ever come across. And we design everything we do for clients. We design bespoke. We don't do anything off the shelf, including this. Yet this piece of work tends to find its way into almost every piece of work we do, whether it's a group piece or whether it's one-to-one coaching. For me, it's that valuable. It's that important. We've cross-referenced it. We've tested against other things. We've even spoken to the originators to be sure that their research is fairly solid as well. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think this is the piece that if we get this right, it makes our job much easier. So I'm purposely giving it a big build-up. And for those people who do want to read and follow up on it, the book to get hold of is called The Leadership Challenge by Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. And just to reassure anybody who's sitting thinking, oh, I've read that book, I'm going to know this. I hope I'm going to bring a slightly different focus to it and a different twist on it, because there's part of it which just seems to be really undervalued, which is these top 4 characteristics that if we demonstrate them to the people who follow us, they will follow us with energy and intensity and a commitment which is lost if we don't demonstrate. What really got me interested in this piece of research was what Kouzes and Posner and the team do is they've done it for 35 years now. Every 3 to 5 years, they go out and ask, it's now up to nearly 2 million people all around the world in all different contexts. They ask them, what makes you follow somebody? And I got really interested because a lot of leadership stuff that's out there seems to be predicated on the idea that we look at somebody who is perceived to be a leader and we try and be like them. You know, so whether it's, you know, Barack Obama, whether it's Michelle Obama, whether it's Steve Jobs, or, you know, whoever the leader of the day is. And my challenge with that is none of us are those people. And the idea, certainly when I was younger, the idea that I had to be like somebody else in order to be a leader really troubled me. So this idea that there were characteristics that followers wanted that I could demonstrate in my own way really interested me. Then I found the results of the research, and over 35 years, pretty much consistently and pretty much all around the world, out of a list of about 40 characteristics that are published each time the research is done, the top 4 are almost always the top 4. So again, I get really interested and go, if we can do those, then people are going to follow us. Then I find that, again, almost all the time, through all the research, through all the time and the changes in those 35 years, the number one thing is the number one thing. So there is one characteristic that if we demonstrate it consistently, people will follow us with energy and intensity and commitment. So before I reveal it, those of you who can get onto your chat, I'd like you to guess or tell me what you think it is. What is the number one thing that followers want from leaders more than anything else? That if we demonstrate it, people will follow us with energy and intensity. Good, Jack, you're straight in there. Humility, we've got humility, we've got trust, we've got authenticity, we've got honesty, we've got trust, humility, empathy, brilliant. Clear direction. We've got more for honesty. We've got more for authenticity. Let me do the reveal. Many of you've got it right, and the rest of you. Sorry, let me share my screen here. The rest of you, things like trust comes from this, and we'll talk about that as we go through the session. So the number one thing that people want from leaders more than anything else is honesty. Now, when I first came across this, I had quite a significant challenge with it, because I looked at it and thought, as leaders, we can't be 100% honest 100% of the time. In fact, I think it would be destructive if we were. I remember working with a financial services institution around the time Iceland went bust as a country, those of you who are old enough to remember that. And this particular financial services institution was heavily invested in Iceland. And I remember just thinking, you know, if we played that honesty piece out accurately, if the chief executive had gone out in front of their people and said, just so you know, we're probably going under in 2 days' time, then they probably would have gone under in 2 days' time. So I don't think it's about honesty as in its purest sense. And when we cross-referenced it with a lot of other research that was around at the time, and subsequently we've done lots of our own surveys and research since, that it's actually more about authenticity and congruence. So It's about us being clear on what we stand for and making sure we demonstrate that to our people on a consistent basis. It's about our people knowing how we're going to show up every day, and our people getting what they expect most of the time. The best way I found to describe it works brilliantly in the UK and doesn't translate very well anywhere else. So for those people outside of the UK, let me try and explain it. Years ago, there was a company who made things like wood varnish and wood stain, and they did some paints and things like that. They were called Ronseal, and the whole advertising and marketing campaign was around the basis that it was Ronseal does exactly what it says on the tin. So I remember there was an advert that said Ronseal quick drying wood stain. That's what the product was. Ronseal quick drying wood stain does exactly what it says on the tin. Those people who are in the UK know exactly what I mean. I think that's what we need to demonstrate consistently as leaders. That's what our followers want. That's what gets us more followers and creates more leaders. The ability to do what we say on the tin, to make sure our words and our actions line up, which is a really interesting concept right now. Again, those people in the UK have been watching press conferences and leaders speaking. It's a really interesting concept, but our followers want us to do what we say on the tin, and they'll follow us with more energy and intensity and commitment if we do that. We give them a greater sense of certainty when we do that. The challenge for lots of leaders that I work with is they've just never thought about that before. And how do we know that we're doing what we say on the tin unless we're sure what our tin says? How can we be sure that we're being authentic and congruent unless we're absolutely clear on what we stand for? So I'm going to spend just a few minutes with you, giving you some suggestions as to how you can get really clear on what you stand for as leader, that you can demonstrate this, how you can demonstrate this number one thing to other people, how you can make sure that you're doing this consistent. And then I'll take any questions that you've got from you in just a moment. So here are some things that you can do to make sure that you're demonstrating this number one thing that people want from leaders. So the first thing is asking yourself the question, what do I stand for as a leader? What is my core belief? Those of you who followed Simon Sinek's work, I know it's increasingly popular, and I really love Simon Sinek. I certainly like his really, really early stuff. This is very similar to the whole thing about purpose and what's your why. The interesting thing about this for me is the part of the brain that really answers this question hasn't got capacity for language. So this isn't an easy question to answer. We've got to spend some time on it and reflect on it. And I often find it's best when I'm coaching people to get them to think about the question and then put it to one side and then come back and revisit it again. Understanding what our core belief is as a leader is critical. Then we can decide to what degree we share that really explicitly with our followers, or we do it implicitly in how we act every day. But what do you stand for as a leader? What's your core belief is the first thing to do to strengthen that number one thing. Next up, here's an interesting question. If I was to come to work for you, how can I expect you to be? And I phrase it in that way very, very purposefully. How can I expect you to be? It's a combination of, behavior and priority and how you make me feel. It's really about how are you going to show up every day? How are you going to show up for me? And how will I see you showing up for other people? Get clear on that and make sure you're showing up in a way which reflects your core belief and what you stand for as a leader. Third on this list, values are really important. Being clear on your values, I think, is a critical part of leadership. I think now's a good time to say, if anybody's coming across this kind of stuff for the first time, there's always this slight danger that people feel it's somehow a little bit soft. Certainly if you've come from a really, really strong operational background and then you're in a leadership position, sometimes this feels like stuff that you might get round to when the job's done. The clear message I've got around this is, for people to believe the message, they've got to first believe the messenger. If you want people to do the things you need them to do really well and deliver what needs to be delivered, they need to believe in you first. And these are the ways to help people to believe in you. So values are talked about lots in organizations, both from an organizational point of view, which we're actually going to touch on in the next session, but also from an individual point of view. The question to answer to get really crystal clear on your values is, what's most important to you really? And it's what's most important to you as a person, rather than just what's most important to you at work. Sometimes I see, I've done lots of work around values over the years. I've been on all sorts of interesting and weird and wacky values explorations. But sometimes I get really frustrated because it's focused on, like, what are your leadership values? We don't have a separate set of values at home to at work, to when we're with our friends, to when we are with in our social circle. We might have slightly different settings as to which values come to the fore at different times. But to be clear on your values, it's the question, what's most important to you really? And what's most important to you as a person, not as somebody just at work. Fourth is a really lovely, simple self-audit to make sure that you are doing this number one thing. You're demonstrating authenticity and congruence, and that you're doing what you say on the tin. And it's just at some point every week that you sit down and ask yourself, have I done what I said I would do? And if most weeks you can consistently answer, yes, I've done the things that I said I was going to do, it will build up and people will see you as honest and authentic and confident. And the final one, I've got to admit, I actually debated whether to include this or not, because my experience, and this might not be everyone's experience, but my experience is there's an increasing split at the moment around this idea of vulnerability. So I'm working with some people who have studied people like Brené Brown and are real fans of it, and are seeing the power of vulnerability and are really working to become, really open-hearted and really, really vulnerable, which I think is really powerful, by the way. I'm a huge, huge fan of that work. But I'm also seeing some people who are hearing about vulnerability and are becoming more and more nervous about it, and are wondering what it means to be vulnerable. And being at the beginning of the journey, some of the things they're hearing and seeing, it's probably putting them off. So for those of you who are in it, who are into it, and then carry on. It's one of the ways to help people to see is authentic and congruent. For those of you who might just be starting the journey and wondering what I mean, I think there are simple ways and simple things that you can do and say for your people to help them to see you as vulnerable. And also, vulnerability is one of the core tenets of high-performing teams. It's one of the quickest and best ways to build trust within a team. So to give you even more reason to do this, that's it. It's not just about people seeing you generally as a strong leader, but it's also about how you build a team. So you can be vulnerable just by saying simple things like, I don't know. Let's find out. Why don't we find out together? I think you can demonstrate a degree of vulnerability by saying, you know what, I need your help with this because I think you're better than me at this stuff. I also think you build vulnerability by saying, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I made a mistake, I'll do better next time. All of those things together demonstrate a degree of vulnerability. It takes away from this idea that we've got to be stoic and in control and always right, which for me is a really old-fashioned view of leadership. So I've set the scene for the number one thing. I've shared what it is, this honesty, this authenticity, this congruence, this degree. We do what we say on the tin. And I've shared 5 things that I think if you do them to some degree, then it will help to strengthen even more this number one thing that people want from leaders. And by the way, if you're looking at those and saying, I do all of those things, then that's fantastic. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a moment, and I'm going to take any questions that you might have.
So we've got quite a few, Richard.
Great.
I think the first thing that made me smile was Linda's comment about this is killing me when you were building up. Just saying we were all like this waiting and tell us what is it? So just the first thing that just made me smile, and quite a few people I'm sure as well. So few comments there.
I've got Matthew's question in front of me, which is how can leaders be authentic during a time of crisis the unknown, the unprecedented, and what the future holds, i.e. uncertainty with jobs. So, okay, it's really difficult is the first thing. I don't think it's easy. There are a couple of things we're going to cover in a moment, which I think help. I think being as transparent as we possibly can be, again, just with a little caveat that I know we can't always be honest, or it's not right to be totally honest all of the time. But I think being as honest and transparent as we can be is the best that most of us can do at the moment. I was speaking to somebody from the US last week. So they are getting ready to open next week, I think. And what that means is, to the rest of the world, we're going, great, that's good signs, that gives us hope. And he was saying it is, and that means I'm bringing some of my team back, and some of my team I'm not bringing back. And there isn't really a good process for us to do it. We're not going to go back and look at performance reviews or anything like that. I think it's going to be a bit potluck. And in that situation, I think how we phrase it specifically has to be right for the audience. But I think the worst thing that we could do is to pretend that it's anything other than that. And I think our people appreciate it much more when we're as transparent as we can be, because it gives, even in us saying, right now, I don't know what the answer is. As soon as I've got some clarity, I'll come to you, and rest assured, in between time, I'll be in touch as much as possible. That gives people a degree of certainty, because they know there's nothing going on, or they've got a greater belief that there's nothing going on behind the scenes. I'm going to keep coming back to an idea of vision. I'm going to touch on it in a little while, and I'm going to spend more time on it next time. And I think I mentioned it on the first session. Creating a vision with the team is really incredibly valuable right now. It's not a vision about what we're going to achieve or deliver. It's a vision about how we're going to be together and what we agree to as a collective, how we want to be as a collective in this period of incredible uncertainty. I'm a huge fan of that, and I think that's one of the really valuable things you can do. I'm just reading Nikki's here. Let me see. To lead, I think you need to be comfortable with vulnerability. Leaders sometimes think they have to know all the answers. Letting go of controlling and predicting the outcome is something that really needs to happen. I'm going to agree with you hugely, Nikki, and I'm going to say more about that in a minute, because it ties in with another one of these top 4 characteristics. I've had a note just saying, do say a little bit more about the self-audit that I mentioned. So you'll see in a moment, I really like to mix in leadership principles and philosophies, and really practical things that I think people need to do consistently. And self-audits for me is a way of doing that. So things like, working out what you stand for as a leader is really powerful, and then working out how you demonstrate that is really powerful. But on this list, being able to sit down for 5 minutes or 3 minutes every week and thinking about, here's some things that I promised I would do for colleagues, for my boss, for my visitors, customers, guests, for my people in particular. Here are things that I promised to do and I've done them, is a really simple, valuable thing that I think any of us can do. And you'll see as we go through numbers 2, 3, and 4 on the list, there are more self-audits that I think we can do as leaders to just basically form leadership habits. So let me move on and share with you numbers 2, 3, and 4 on this top 4 list of things that follows on from leaders. And again, just remember, 35 years all around the world, these top 4 are pretty much consistently the top 4. And when I've tested them over and over again with every audience that I work with, there is consistency in these. You can hear that doorbell, it's downstairs trying to get in, I'm not going to let them in. So number 2 on the list is we want our leaders to be competent. We want our leaders to be competent as leaders, not just as subject matter experts. Here's the thing. People will follow us because we're a technical expert up to a point. But the challenging thing is, if we work for a boss who has been in our job and has got promoted, excuse me just a minute. Yes, come in. I've got somebody knocking at the door of my office. Just give me 1 second, excuse me. Sorry, mate, I'm on a webinar, so just take your name. Nugent. Right. Thank you. Sorry, delivery man actually came into my office. I'm really, really sorry. So we want people to be competent as a leader, not just a subject matter expert. If we have somebody who works with us who is a technical expert and they look at us and think that we got promoted because we were so brilliant at their job, there's a point at which that technical expertise starts to get in the way of relationships. This is, I guess, a nice way of saying that control freaks tend to lose talented people during times of change. Because what we really want is we want to look at somebody and think they've got what it takes to move us from where we are today to where we need to be. That's the fundamental question. Can people look at us and think that we've got what it takes to take us from where we are today to where we need to be? And if the answer to that is yes, then they'll follow us with energy and intensity. Number 3 on the list, and again, it's worth saying, number 1's always the number 1 thing. Over the years, number 2, 3, and 4 have swapped places like pretty much every time the researchers come out. So number 3, it currently is forward facing. So this is really where vision comes into its own again. It's worth saying, I think this is a psychological need. If you think of the amount of times we say things like we want to see the light at the end of the tunnel, as human beings, we tend to get certainty and comfort from looking to the future, and we tend not to get certainty and comfort from looking to the past. Because if the past was really bad, we don't want to hang out there. If the past was really good and we know we can't get back there, then it unsettles us. So leaders who create great visions are fantastic. But here's another little self-audit coming up. If we spend more time talking about the future rather than the past in our moment-by-moment conversations with people, then they will tend to see us as somebody who is forward-facing. So make another one of these little self-audits that you do, on a weekly basis, thinking about the small conversations that you've had with people, and check, have you spent more time talking about the future rather than the past? And if you have, then people will see you as forward-facing. And number 4 on the list is inspiring. Now, it will be no surprise to anybody, I don't think, to see inspiring on a list of desired leadership characteristics. But I think there's a nuance which is really important, and I think it's especially important in the context of diversity. Because when I was growing up in leadership, there was this sense that being inspiring was about being able to pump your fist and thump your chest and stand on stage and lead from the front. And I absolutely do not think that that's what being inspiring is about. Don't get me wrong, if you're really brilliant naturally at those things, or you've developed yourself to be really good at that, then that's great. But that's not really what being inspiring is about. You will all know people, you'll have either worked for people or with people, that if they walked into a room without really doing anything, they would just suck the energy right out of the room. And you'll also know people that have worked for people, hopefully a current boss, where if they walked into the room and just walked around the room without really doing anything, they would fill the room with energy just by being there. And that's really what being inspiring is. If we work on leaving people with more energy on a consistent basis than they had before the interaction with us, then they will experience us as being inspiring. If we leave people with more energy on a consistent basis, they will perceive us as being inspiring. So sometimes that's about how you walk into the office. That's sometimes about how you show up on a Zoom like this. That's sometimes about how you word emails. The good thing about this is I think you can give energy with good news and bad news. You can give energy on Zooms. You can give energy face to face. You can give energy on the phone, and you can take it away in all of those settings and contexts as well. So in a moment, I'm going to come out for more questions or ideas or insights, but let me just recap on them. Number one thing that people want from leaders, and that we have to demonstrate now more than ever, is honesty, authenticity, congruency. Do what you say on the tin. We want our leaders to be competent as leaders, not just subject matter experts. Your people will be looking at you and thinking, have they got what it takes to take us from where we are now to where we need to be? In your conversation, spend more time talking about the future rather than the past, and people will perceive you as being forward-facing. And finally, leave people with more energy on a consistent basis. And week by week, check in with yourself to make sure that you've done that, and people will perceive you and see you as being inspiring. Let me pause there and pick up any questions. And apologize again for the delivery man coming. Question from Francesca, I think. Sorry, if you could talk more about the future. Yeah, okay, so the psychological angle, first of all, as human beings, we tend to get more comfort from talking about and thinking about the future rather than talking about and thinking about the past. Because if the past was bad, we don't like to hang around there. And if the past was really good, then we can sometimes get upset by thinking about what it was like. This has been one of my, just on a very personal level, this has been one of my biggest challenges of this whole 8, 9, 10 weeks, because things were really great up until this happened. You know, work was good, family was good, like I had the right balance, business was building, the kind of clients we're working with was as good as it's ever been. So when I think about that now, if I spend enough time thinking about how great things were in January and December and November and all the plans we had in place for this year, there isn't actually anything positive coming out of that from me from a resourceful point of view. And if I talk to my team about that, all that does is create a negative impact. So the more we can talk about the future and what the future might hold and what the future possibilities might be, and at the moment, for me, what we're doing is talking lots about the positive things that are happening around the world right now. So even the fact that client in Florida has gone back next week, there's so much unknown about that, but it's a sign of progress for us and a sign of possibilities that we will have the opportunity to do more of the kind of things that we generally do sooner than we might have thought. It might all change, but right now that's a more useful conversation than think about how good things were before all this hit. I hope that answers the question.
Richard,
so
there is a question that has appeared in the Q&A.
Sorry, I missed that. Yeah, let me hear that. What qualities do we find indicate leaders' competency in the context of getting teams or organizations where they need to be? Oh, Jack, that's a brilliant question. So I'll answer it, and then just with a caveat that I'll probably repeat this again next week. So one of the first questions that I ask anybody who's in a senior leadership position now, and certainly when we speak to senior leadership teams, I ask, what is strategy and what is your strategy? Now, I know not everybody on this call will be responsible for setting strategy. Some of you might not even be necessarily responsible for executing it. But what I'm really interested in is how clear and aligned are we when we talk about what this business is trying to do or achieve. And if I shrink this all the way down to a team or a business unit, how clear are we collectively on what we should be doing or achieving? And like I say, I make no apologies for repeating this next week. 7 out of the last 10 8 out of the last 10 most senior leadership teams that I've worked with around the table had no consensus on what their definition of strategy was, nor on what their business's strategy was. And for me, how can the rest of the business know what we're supposed to be doing if you don't around the top table? Is always my sometimes slightly delicate challenge back. So that's my starting point. I know there are lots of other things that then need to be in place that sit under that, but unless we're clear collectively at the very top and then within teams or departments or business units, then nobody else can be. So that's my starting point. Okay, what I'd love, just before we move on, I'd love you to either write down, on your own notepad, or if you quickly can type into your chat, from those top 4 things, what has been the first insight or the key insight that you've had so far? And I'm going to give you just a minute to do that, and then we're going to move on to 2 really practical tools around transparency and knowing what you should do. Knowing what you should say when you've got nothing to say. I'm going to leave 30 seconds.
Perhaps I'll mention mine. I've just written it down as the people are typing. For me, it's about the vision, and I can see that few people are mentioning that as well. As you said, it's just so easy to look back at, how it was. And I find myself saying, even from our perspective at WHTL, we were just doing so well before all of this struck. And I'm sure a lot of people will be thinking about that. And then all of this happened, totally unexpected. And you find yourself trapped into, some of the negativity, some of the uncertainty sometimes feels overwhelming. So actually trying to think about the future and being forward facing, trying to paint a positive vision for what it might look like for ourselves, first of all, as part of their weekly self-audit, just really thinking that through, also to portray that to those who are in teams and those who follow us and those who participate in our things. So that for me, that was probably one of the key things that has resonated with me. So really encourage everybody to type your reflections in the chat and share.
Excellent. Yeah, I totally agree. And as I say, we'll say more, a little bit more on it next week, and how vision and strategy interact as well. So, excellent. Let me get into a couple of really simple to apply but really useful tools. The first around transparency. So my purpose for focusing on this is that we know that we need a greater degree of certainty than ever. Sorry, greater sense of certainty right now, because there is lots of uncertainty out there. And transparency, if our people know that we're being as transparent as we possibly can be, not only does it link to that number one thing that people want from leaders, but it also, let me share my screen. It also builds a greater degree of trust. And we need our people to trust us more than ever right now. So I was thinking, like, there's so much writing about transparency, but how do we actually do it? How do we create it? How do we make it happen? And this for me is the most straightforward tool I've ever come across. And again, people who like to research and look at backgrounds, this is developed from the work of Chris Argyris, if anybody wants to go and look him up. So this is predicated on the idea that in any conversation, there are actually 2 conversations going on. So first is the conversations actually going on in our heads, which is what we really mean. And then there's the conversation that's going on in between our noses. And that is often censored to make, where we're working so hard to try and position things in the right way that sometimes the message is lost. So what this is about being, so direct that we're offensive, or we're just, just totally telling it as it is, regardless of people's feelings. But what this is doing is reducing the amount of hidden agendas and increasing the amount of relevant information that's shared. To me, that's what being transparent is about at the moment. Reducing hidden agendas, increasing the amount of relevant information that's shared. So let me give an example from my world, and maybe you can think about how you can do this in your world. So quite often I will go and share with clients, go down and sit with clients for a first time, and they'll start telling me about their team, for example, and they'll say something like, we're a really passionate team and everyone gets on really, really, really well. Obviously there's banter, which is always a warning sign for me. Obviously there's banter. And there's one or two people in the team maybe who rub each other up the wrong way, but on the whole, we get on well. And what we need to do in the next phase of our development is we need to break down a few barriers, and we just need to work a little bit better together. At which point, I wish I'd done this at the beginning. So I say, before going any further, can I just show you something? And I share with them literally, here's a little model. You've got left column communication, which is what's actually going on in your head right now. And you've got right column, which is what you're actually saying to me, which tends to be a little bit censored. And I understand why, because we've just met. There are points during this conversation where I'm going to say to you, left column, what do you mean by that? And what I'd like you to do, if you're okay, is to tell me then what's actually really good in your head. And there may be times where I say, right, I'm going to be left column now, which allows me to say a little bit less censored what's going on in my head. Because the more we do that, then the more we're able to share relevant information. So I share it really, really overtly as a model and a framework. And at that point in the example I gave you, what I'd go straight to is, okay, so left column, what do you mean by banter? Because I've been around a lot of banter, and most of it actually, left column it tends to be quite a negative thing. So left column, what do you mean by banter? So this idea of having a left column and a right column, it's actually a really explicit context for us to be able to say to people, tell us what you really get now. And the most powerfully I've ever used this, I did pretty much exactly what I've described there. And she went, okay, left column, the CEO is married to the marketing director, and the finance director and the HR director don't like her. I was like, okay, that's an interesting context and starting point for the work that we're about to do. It doesn't always create that degree of transparency so immediately. But by using this as a framework, to be able to say to people, we're going to have a conversation in this way, it can help really speed up the transparency. Does that make sense as a really simple, straightforward tool to use?
I think comments are coming through.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jack.
I think it's really interesting if you frame the conversation that way up front. You can deliver the message in a more straightforward way, because sometimes we're just always so worried, and I say this we being Italian, being very direct, but there is a British way of always trying to talk, around issue, being exceptionally polite, but then actually you're not saying what you really mean. So very helpful, and I can see the comments coming through in terms of really just if you frame it, I'm going to say what I really mean, and I'm being left column now. I think it's really helpful, very useful.
Brilliant, and actually it brings a couple of interesting things to mind. So one is one of our team is a real expert in cross-cultural work, and he uses this as a tool as part of that conversation, because different cultures are, if that was a scale of left column to right column, different cultures are naturally different points on that. So actually just having that as a context to be able to use that by going, oh, so to me that feels like you're being really left column there. It gives a frame for you to be going, oh no, I didn't think I was, but the other thing is there's actually some research, I think it dates back to 2014, that at least suggests that women are better at being transparent in business conversations than men, which is really, really interesting. Great. So let me give you my second really, really practical takeaway tool, which is about what to say when we don't know what to say. And I'm going to be really left column here, that the real takeaway that I want you all to have is that we need to be communicating with people even more than ever right now. And I want to stop short of saying it doesn't matter what we say as long as we're saying something, because we could be destructive. But my huge away from is we can't not communicate. Not saying anything and not reaching out is a message in itself. And we all know logically that during change, the volume of communication should go up. But what tends to happen, and this has been borne out again by the research we've been doing over the last month, is that the amount of communication tends to go down. And I think it's primarily because people just don't know what to say. Most of us on this call don't really want to reach out to people, but we don't really have something specific to say or share. So here's 5 things that we could say. My main message is say something. So I say there's some things that are as simple as, here's what I've been doing this week. What have you been up to? I think that's especially relevant when we're having conversations where at least one of the party is furloughed, because we can't talk about business things, but we might still want to be in touch with them. Being really transparent, being really left column. I've got nothing specific to say. I've got nothing specific to update you on, but I wanted to reach out and speak to you anyway. So how are things? The third's really important to me at the moment. I guess it's from a well-being point of view. I'm sure lots of you have seen this, but there is definite power in asking how somebody is twice. How are you? Because again, the British answer to that tends to be, oh, fine, okay, or not bad, or whatever it is. Okay, how are you? No, really, how are you? And we tend to get a more accurate, more transparent, more human response to that third. Number 4, linking back about something I said earlier on, getting in touch with people and saying, you know what, you're really good at this. How do you do that? I'd love to learn from you. Now's a great time for us to have the opportunity to have that, where operations aren't at full tilt, for example. So, you know, that thing that you do, how do you do it? How did you get so good at it? And the 5th is what ideas do you have? So, for example, we've ended up talking quite a lot again about vision this time. Going out and asking your team what the vision should be. You know, there's nothing more powerful than creating a shared vision, you know, genuinely creating a shared vision. But it might be ideas about how operations are going to open up. I was in a conversation last week about how are we going to get frontline staff to really give us ideas about how we reopen in such a way that's safe and compliant, but also creates a positive visitor experience. So, you know, using this opportunity to take ideas and asking what ideas do you have. So again, 5 really simple things to say when you've got nothing to say, but my key message is say something. Don't not communicate, because it's a message in itself. And this isn't the time for that. So we've got a couple of minutes to wrap up. So before I give a final little message and hand back to Tia, now is your last chance for now to ask any questions about anything we focused on in this session, or share any ideas, any insights, any questions, any ideas. Now's your last chance for now.
I think, Richard, just while people think about, you know, typing some comments, you might want to wrap up with one comment from Sue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Sue. Yeah, don't not communicate. I see so much in change, people not communicating because there's nothing to say, and there's a stronger message in that than ever before. And Nikki, yeah, the self-audit. I think I said this last time, I'm a big fan of doing things little and often and having moments. I encourage coaching clients to really notice when they're really productive and when they're less productive across their week. We've all got this It's actually called the basic rest activity cycle. We've got these natural hormone releases, which means, well, more energetic, less energetic, more productive, less productive. One of the things I'd encourage people to do is notice when they're naturally a bit less productive and use those times to do the reflective practices. It means you're not losing out in terms of time or productivity. So, yeah. Brilliant. And Angela, thanks for sharing. It's been helpful. Like that's perfect. It's great that you can apply it straight away. And actually, again, that links really nicely to my last point, which is just that if you, the quicker that you apply the learning and the insights you've had from this, or share it with other people, the stickier that it becomes, the more the neurological pathways that you're building will strengthen. So do something with it quickly. And as I said at the beginning, people, I've actually had a couple of emails from people who've said something like, I was going to ask you this, but I was worried in case you'd be really busy. Just drop me an email. If I'm really busy, I'll get back to you when I can. But other than that, next week, we're going to spend some time creating the future and looking at resetting the team. And from my point of view, I look forward to seeing you then. And Tia, back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on a half-term week, when I know that you all have the children who want to go probably out into the garden, into the sunshine, and enjoying this beautiful weather. So thank you very much. A couple of things from me. Richard started by saying he wanted this to be a learning experience that added value and created action. And I think that from some of the comments I have seen, there is already action. Things around the weekly self-audit seems to resonate with quite a few people, as well as I'm going to be left column. I love that. I'm going to use that. And I think for all of us, we need to have that positive vision for the future, for our own sake, as well as for the sake of our teams and those around us. Join us for the session next week on the 3rd of June at 10 o'clock, Creating Our Future, pressing the reset button, as well as for the other 3 sessions that we've got planned. Go and have a look on our website, whtl.com, events page, to see what else we have prepared for you. Thank you very much, and don't forget to fill in the form, which we will be sending out to you shortly. Have a lovely day. Thank you and goodbye.